Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I don't have slides, but I prefer speaking from here. First of all, I would like to thank ETUI for the organization, but also for the cooperation in these years. Of course, my thanks to ETUI, but also ETUC, and personally to Bernadette Segol, also for the kind words of introduction she started with at the very beginning, and indeed it has been not only a pleasure, but also a privilege and a huge responsibility to work with social partners from the European Commission in these years. I think this conference is taking place at a very important time, but I was thinking about the title, which is assuming that Europe is at a crossroads, and I thought that we have been so many times at crossroads. Sometimes you feel like being in a labyrinth. When you think that you arrive not the first time, but probably the second time or the third time to the same crossroads. It feels like the compass not working. When you see that it's not obvious for everyone that growth requires investment, or a market to grow requires not only supply but also demand. Bernadette knows very well that I don't very often use French expressions. I only do it when I have a strong justification. But the feeling is a kind of déjà vu. That we might have been here before. For example, in 2010, when we thought we are emerging from a crisis, the most frequently used word in 2010 spring in Brussels was exit. Exit from the climate. And there was an exit supposedly from the instruments that responded to the Great Recession of 2008 and 9 in the area of the fiscal policies and also monetary policies. And probably this exit was premature and contributed to the entry into the second recession in 2011. So it was, in a way, the dead end of internal devaluation, and now I believe we are, in a way, at the crossroads, but another possible blind alley of deflation. And the deflation risk, I'm not sure has been taken sufficiently seriously. In the recent period, there's been a lot of talk about this, probably very little action, and very little public reflection about the enormous risk this brings to the European economy and the European society. But a déjà vu also comes to my mind because of so much talk now about investment and growth without exactly telling where the resources for investment would come from in the coming period. This is a reminder of 2012. When in the first semester we arrived to a kind of package of growth and investment. It included many ideas, some which materialized to recapitalize the European Investment Bank and lend more from this institution, to use the structural funds more efficiently. That probably the potential of these measures which were included in this package were overestimated and did not sufficiently contribute to an economic recovery. The word recovery was not used enough, in my view. When people mix growth for recovery, it means that they underestimate the importance of the counter-cyclical measures which are needed in order to get out of a recession, as opposed to improve the chance of longer-term economic growth. So for various reasons, in the last about 7 years, because it's not less now than 7 years, the European Union has been in a financial as well as economic crisis, which pushed many countries also into a social crisis. After these 7 years, I believe it's not an exaggeration to speak about a need for reconstruction. And this reconstruction in Europe has to take place in various territories in various dimensions. First of all, I think there is a need for a reconstruction of the economy. This is probably the most obvious, but I think it's less obvious for all that for a reconstruction of the economy, there's a need for a reconstruction of the European business model, because it's not the European social model which caused this long crisis. It's fundamentally the business model, starting with the under-regulated financial sector, the lack of an industrial policy, which resulted in property bubbles in small and big countries, and very vulnerable situations and long subsequent recessions. The lack of speed with technological change, which resulted in the Commission developing a digital agenda at the beginning of the mandate, and also the need to reconcile better economic development and the response to the environmental challenges, the issues of sustainability, which towards the end of our mandate resulted in a package on the circular economy, including a green employment initiative. But the point I want to make in this context is that the efforts to redesign or rebuild this business model have not yet resulted in an economic recovery in a sustainable, balanced and job-rich manner, largely because it has not yet channeled the resources to the real economy in order to help enterprises to grow and help enterprises to hire more people. This is where I think there is still a need for some innovative thinking, how to ensure that companies get equity, companies get bank lending, companies get more resources, especially in countries that have been in recession in the longest. Again, this points to the EIB or the EIB group, including the European Investment Fund, but maybe there would be a need to boost capacity there to be able to supply more funds, more equity for growth. Secondly, I should speak about the need for reconstruction what concerns the European social model. The economic and financial crisis has caused a damage to the European social model, a social emergency in a number of countries of the EU periphery, but especially in the so-called program countries. And from this perspective, indeed, we are at crossroads, because there are clashing philosophies, clashing interpretation of the social mandate of the European Union. There are some who speak about a repatriation, suggesting that Europe should do less in terms of the social affairs, and obviously others who call for the strengthening of the European social model, and also the strengthening of the social dimension of various EU policies, which applies to the single market, applies to the EU budget, and also applies to the monetary union. In order to strengthen, in these difficult times, the European social model, the Barroso II Commission adopted a number of initiatives, including the employment package, the youth employment package, the social investment package, despite the fact that welfare states in the European Union are in the national competence. But with the social investment package, we developed a number of proposals and also concrete actions to ensure that these national welfare systems can be improved, can be remodeled, following the most effective ones in the European Union, in order to address problems like child poverty, long-term care, or homelessness. This package also included guidance about how to use better EU financial instruments in order to support these actions. But indeed, as we just heard from the previous speaker, and I'm grateful for this to be mentioned, the Youth Guarantee has been a very important initiative from this Commission in order to complement the existing institutions of education and employment policy, and especially what concerns the school-to-work transitions. I was a bit disappointed last week in our conference on labor economics when one of the trade union leaders called the youth guarantee a placebo. I'm sorry, this is not a placebo. This is a very real reform program, which at the same time is an investment program. There are very clear allocations at the EU level and in the member states, which are now invested in the establishment of the youth guarantee. The very concrete actions taken, and the Commission already recently reported publicly, but we will also report more on the 8th of October, when the next high-level summit of heads of state and government will take place in Milan, in order to take stock of the measures that have been taken against youth unemployment. Obviously, in a high-growth situation, the youth guarantee delivers more than in a recession time, but it doesn't mean that the reforms of public employment services, the reforms of training programs, and many other actions that are taken following pilot projects that were already launched last year would be unimportant. This is absolutely a critical intervention, since, as we heard from the colleague from the IMF, in some countries, indeed, youth unemployment is at a dramatic level, which practically means that the diversity of the EU from this point of view has turned into a major imbalance. The structural problems have been aggregated by the cyclical one. This is for the professional economists in the room. And this indeed is a major human capital loss for the European Union that has to be addressed through forceful intervention. Obviously, the European social model cannot be reconstructed without rebuilding social dialogue in countries where it has been damaged, undermined, or even marginalized during the crisis years. This has been a joint effort for us with the ILO in countries like Greece, but also in Portugal, and this, I believe, needs to be continued. But I wanted to stress that the European ambition for high employment and social standards, in my view, cannot be fulfilled purely through what we call conventional means, legislation at the EU level, or the traditional cohesion policy funding. There have to be new avenues for various reasons, partly because Europe has moved on in terms of integration and policy coordination, but also because Europe became wider and legislation is more difficult for a variety of reasons. You have seen that there is a kind of legislative fatigue, which makes it very difficult to bring in new proposals. Where it is justified, it is possible, but we need to open up new avenues, for example, developing the social economy with more support from the EU level. This is very much in the focus of the Italian presidency, which in November will hold a conference in Rome about this. But the third and perhaps the most important reconstruction in my view, and this is not going to be a novelty for many in the room, is the reconstruction of the monetary union. I think the key lesson from the 2011 and 12 period is that purely through national effort, purely through a muddling through strategy, this crisis will not be resolved, it will not go away. Europe will not emerge in a sustainable manner from this quagmire without continuing reconstruction of the EMU. It started with the four presidents' report in 2012. The banking union already made some progress, but this is probably not sufficient. This is just a beginning of a longer process. And the Commission's blueprint outlined a long-term vision for this reconstruction. This blueprint included the concept of automatic stabilizers, which is a necessary element of any sustainable monetary union in order to be able to respond to asymmetries and the problems of cyclicality. In fact, in this room, together with the Bertelsmann Stiftung, we already had two excellent conferences to explore the necessity and also the options for automatic stabilizers in the monetary union. Why is it necessary? Because we saw the extreme divergences and polarization as a result of the crisis, which probably cannot be overcome without some form of fiscal capacity at the level of the monetary union. Convergence is a key concept. I don't think the monetary union can be sustainable for the long term if there are mechanisms which actually prohibit convergence in employment and social conditions, and we have to reinforce other mechanisms which actually facilitate and help convergence by strengthening solidarity, but not only in words, but also in financial terms. This, in my view, is absolutely necessary if we want to make the economic and monetary union irreversible, and if we want to make the European Union more prosperous. This also means that we cannot leave the social outcome of the functioning of the EMU to the invisible hand, just like we cannot leave it leave the social outcome of the single market to the invisible hand, with a need for a strong involvement of the social partners, employees and employers, organization, in the governance of all this, not only in the European semester, but also in many other steps which influence the functioning of the EU and the EMU. My final point in closing would be that this, in my view, is also necessary, and that this probably justifies the title, which includes the word Crossroads, because this is a decision time soon about the Europe 2020 strategy. I think the reflection which was launched in the spring period by the Commission to take stock with the developments after the launch of the Europe 2020 will continue for some time, but the incoming Commission will have to come to some kind of synthesis and proposals about the next 5 years. And of course, it's not the first time when we have noticed the gap between the actual developments and the targets of the Europe 2020 strategy. We developed the employment package for the job-rich recovery. We developed the social investment package in order to restore the chance of the EU to move towards these targets that were agreed in 2010. This is probably insufficient now. There is probably a need for more initiatives and more investment. This is not only important to move towards smart, sustainable and inclusive growth at the end, but it's probably important for elementary fairness and balanced growth opportunities in the European Union, and rebuild not only the EU economy and society, but also the public trust in the European Union project. Thank you very much.